Welcome to today's Ask a Data Analyst, making the most of your product data event. So we've got 45 minutes today where we'll be helping you solve any questions or challenges that you have about your product data. So we got a few questions when everyone registered, so we will start with those, but we'll also be taking live questions as we go. So feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A button at any time during this event. If there's, for example, something that we talk about or say, and if you have any follow-up or clarifying questions, feel free to ask. We'd also like to keep this pretty interactive and conversational. Again, really, we're here to help you answer any questions that you have. So if you would like to actually kind of talk and not just type things in the chat, just raise your hand or ask in the chat, and we can certainly unmute you so you can talk to one of our data analysts directly. And then just a few housekeeping items before we jump into intros. So this is being recorded, so just ask that everyone kind of keep that in mind when asking your questions or sharing any information with us. And then we will also be sending out a recording to everyone tomorrow. All right, so before we actually jump into questions, I do want to give some context on why we're qualified to help you today. So Mozart Data, we provide the data infrastructure that you need to aggregate, organize, and prepare your data for analysis. Aside from providing companies with this technology, we also have a team of data analysts who help our customers set up this data infrastructure and also find the answers that they're looking for in their data. And so that brings me to two of our data analysts who are here to help you all today. So first, we have Adam Farr. He joined Mozart back in September of last year after having many different roles in music tech and data analytics. Adam was actually our first customer who used the platform as a data analyst, and he enjoys getting deep into data problems by throwing on headphones, turning on some good music, and coding away. And then we also have Ryan Mason. So Ryan joins Mozart after wearing many hats throughout the data landscape and lifecycle. So from building internal tools to managing high-performance analytic databases, Ryan has worked in all parts of the stack, both directly and as a manager. He started as a data customer and cares deeply about the experience of the people who use the tools that he builds. So we're going to go through really quickly an introduction on what product analytics is. Ryan's going to talk briefly about it. So if you're not sure what to ask about today, this might help spark some ideas. I'll hand it over to you, Ryan.
All right, thanks, Felicia. So I'm not going to read all these words to you on the screen, but I wanted to put some kind of keywords that come up often with product analytics. I think the key thing we want to focus on is how our customers interact with the products that we make to try and understand where they came from, what they do, how they interact with our products, and hopefully how they help us drive our goals. So I wanted to put these up here to kind of seed your brain for thinking about questions you may want to have. Like Felicia said, you can drop them in the Q&A section as a question or just in the general chat. I think we'll see both of those. And the questions that we'll talk about next are the ones that we collected during registration. So we've got kind of a nice set that we've had a little bit of time to do our homework on.
Okay, well, without further ado, let's jump into some of the questions that we got. So first off, we got a question about launching new products, and basically they'd like a better way to track their KPIs for those product launches. Right now, they're tracking them in a spreadsheet manually. They have data coming in from QuickBooks, Salesforce, and their own databases that they need to connect together.
All right, so this question is near and dear to my heart. My first analyst job out of grad school involved doing exactly this. I spent a little less than 1 day a week collecting data from a bunch of different sources, putting it into spreadsheets, and trying to build the charts and graphs that the management team wanted to work with. Just for reminder, KPI is key performance indicators. This is the metrics that you build to try and understand what's happening in your business. it's pretty amazing. Spreadsheets are a super powerful tool. We'll mention them several times throughout here. But sometimes you outgrow them. There's times when you may not want to manually copy QuickBooks, Salesforce, and other databases into a spreadsheet and then do the same transformations there all the time. Certainly possible, but maybe not the most exciting thing to do. And so once your data reaches kind of a larger scale, or the complexity becomes such that doing this work in spreadsheets directly is very hard, a data warehouse can make a big difference, where you bring all the data together, you can build some transformations to kind of get it in the shape that you need for understanding it, and then you can take it out of the data warehouse to use in other tools. So I'd say we're not anti-spreadsheet, but I think there's a time and a place when you outgrow them, where data warehouses can be really great. Let's see. Yeah, and just a side note, we have a way to put data back into spreadsheets for you automatically, so we can make it a quite seamless experience for people who are used to getting ingesting data from a spreadsheet.
Great. So we also got a question that it was kind of vague. So it was more on the topic of just social media advertising. So I think there's lots of ways to tackle this topic. There's lots of questions that kind of fall under it. But one of the ones that we most commonly get asked is, you are advertising across all of these different social media channels. And so you're bringing in users through all of them. How do you kind of determine which ad channels are bringing in customers who are more likely to buy? And then also I'll say, the person who submitted this question, if you happen to be here and actually have a more specific question or want us to talk about something more specific related to social media advertising, feel free to either drop it in the chat or in the Q&A, and we can certainly talk about it.
Yeah, so for this one, it sounds a little bit more complicated than it actually is. Basically, for each individual, you just need to know which ad platform they're coming from, and then whether or not they actually made a purchase in your platform. So say you're doing advertising on Facebook. Did this user come from Facebook? Did they enter the app? Did they enter the platform? And did they actually make a purchase? So to actually do that conversion, it should be as straightforward as how many people came through, how many people made the purchase, putting that on the numerator, dividing the two, and getting a percentage of how many people actually converted from that ad platform. From there, you want to do this for all of your different ad platforms. So you have Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So you have 3 different ones. You're doing the conversion for each one of those, and then you're able to compare against those. So the best way to sort of make sure that you're actually tracking from the ad platforms into your actual platform is to use things like UTM parameters, pixel tracking, cookie tracking, that sort of thing, just to make sure that you know this person is actually coming from an ad platform when they make a purchase. And then after that, you can get a little bit more in depth. Instead of just, did they actually buy, where did they come from, where did they actually buy? You can go into different metrics around acquisition costs. So like, how much are you spending on these ad platforms? How much you're actually getting in terms of revenue? If you're an e-com company, doing things like average cart sizes associated with the different platforms. You can get more granular on the platform level, do campaigns, ad creatives, that sort of thing, be able to see those for a specific platform, and then against like every single platform, that different social media platform that you're advertising on. And then sort of additionally, if maybe they aren't actually making a purchase, you can go even a step further and say stuff like, okay, we know that there are certain actions that our users take that end up leading to a purchase. Are the users that are coming in from these social media platforms actually taking those actions? So maybe someone comes in, takes one of those actions and doesn't make a purchase, but you know that given other data, that if they took that action, maybe they actually will buy down the line, say in a week or a month. So you can actually have those be incorporated into your propensity to buy, in addition to the ones that are actually just straight up making purchases.
All right, and our next question asks, thoughts on server-side tracking to bypass issues with cookie or script blocking?
I think this is a great technical question, which is saying, even if you send an event or think you're sending an event from every front end, will all of those make it? And there's a variety of different ways that they might not. So it's important to note when you're doing front-end tracking that you may not capture all of the events that happen. The customer might have cookies blocked, they might have scripts blocked. Because you're running in their browser, they have total control of it. And so there's a lot of things that are hard to ensure. So the comment here about server-side tracking, when you have a server, you control it and you control what gets written. So think about credit card processing. You always send back credit card data to the server to do the processing there in a place where you have more control. So if you want to make sure that you record every event for a customer that you really care about, doing it from the server side is a safer way to ensure that. Now the question is, like, how often does this happen? I think it varies based on the customer base that you have. So if you have a group of people who are very, very security conscious, who really don't want to be tracked, you're likely to miss a lot of people from front-end tracking. If you have a broad swath of the population, some of them will have tracking turned off and some will have it turned on. If you wanted to run an experiment, you could see how often this happens by creating an event that you store on both the front end and the back end and compare how often they're missing. So you can kind of get a sense for your individual population with that basic experiment.
Great. And I just want to remind everyone, so you do have the opportunity to ask live questions. So we're just starting out with the questions that we got during registration. But again, if you have any follow-up questions based on what we're talking about right now, or if you think of anything, put it in either the chat or the Q&A, and we can help address them. Okay. We got a question asking, how do you determine churn for free users?
Okay, so for this question, I have to bring out my trusty churner here. We got this question, and I figured it was sort of mandatory that I pull this out. My mom's family owns a farm here in East Tennessee, so I end up getting a lot of random farm decorations. So, so this is what churn is right here. Is you turn the butter. No, I'm just kidding. Getting back to what actually churn is. So churn is when, so for this example, let's say that you have a subscription-based business. Churn would be where somebody subscribed and then they canceled their subscription. So they have made a purchase, but they are no longer making one. So for free users, how do you define this? They haven't actually made a purchase. They haven't added a subscription and removed it. You don't know what their propensity buy is there. So to start, basically what you need to do is sort of create a framework around what actually might define as churn for a free user. Now, this really comes from you knowing your business well, what your business goals are. So let's just back in the subscription example. So let's say, okay, so first you need to gather all the users that haven't actually subscribed. So you get all those together, and then now you're looking at those. You need to decide how exactly is somebody inactive when they haven't actually added a subscription. So in this case, you can look at the recency of their login. Say there's a part of the platform that you also have that they're using that it isn't associated with a subscription. Say it's like gated content, and then you have free content. Say they're looking at free content on a weekly basis. Okay, so you can look at those event actions like logging in or actually reading content. And then be able to see how that changes over time. So let's just take the login event as an example. So they logged in, 4 or 5 times over the course of a month, and now they're no longer logging in. Okay, well, so that one might be a good one to use as a churn indicator. In terms of actually defining that, you could do something like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, a week, a day. And that's really going to be based around like your business and how you actually see your users using your product. The other thing I sort of wanted to point out here is think about the ways in which a user is actually engaging with your brand in total. It may not just be the front end product. It could be that you also send out email digests, or you have invites to in-person events. Looking into those, looking for metrics in those is also really important. So say you have a segment of users who doesn't really use the front end application, but actually does engage with your emails. And say you're sending like a digest of financial data, for instance, weekly. Well, you might have people who are actually opening these emails over time and actually engaging with your product and being happy with the product because they actually receive these emails. Well, you wouldn't see them in the front end. They wouldn't be logging into the application, but they would be opening these emails. And then sort of furthermore, say it was like a live event, you're getting email invites, you're subscribing to the event, you're actually going to the event. Say there's somebody who's doing this pretty regularly, but then all of a sudden they stop going to the events. It's good to sort of try to segment your user base based off of where they actually are using your product or engaging with your brand in total, and then try to set up churn for that. So in the case of the live events, okay, well, they attended the first 5 that they signed up for. Now they're no longer signing up for them. Okay, they've been sent the last 5. We're going to define that as churn because they actually haven't gone to the last 5. Or the emails, they were opening them up weekly. Now they're no longer doing it for the last 3 months. That's how we're going to set it. So just the broader point there is like, think about all the different touch points that your users have with your product. Clearly, the front end application is going to be like the most important and probably where you're going to be able to see this most granularly, can't talk. But think about just all the different places that people might be engaging and try to think about where people are falling off there.
So I think a follow-on point here is that there is no churn event. So you can't just directly measure someone churning. Churn has to do with your expectations of how your customers interact with your product, and then when they no longer meet that expectation. So this is a great use case for a data warehouse where you can collect a variety of different sources, like Adam said, live events, emails, interacting with your product, for example, and use those things to determine if the person is still engaged. Engagement is a whole other topic, but in general, is that the person still interacting with the tools and services that you've built. And then you can take what you find in the data warehouse and then use that information in other places, kind of like Adam's users who haven't used the feature comment from earlier. Or did I just give away one that hasn't happened yet? Maybe we'll see some more on that. I'm just remembering the dry run. Okay. So there's another good question coming up, which is now what do you do with this information once you've figured it out in the database? Sorry, Adam, to ruin your punchline.
All right. Next question. How do I collect and store product data to feed to a data analyst?
All right. So this is really about time, which I seem to have backwards now from the last question. But a really important thing about data science models is that data scientists use features to make predictions about future events. And when you do feature engineering, you need to know about the time period that you're trying to take data from to make the prediction for the future. One place where this can be dangerous is if you go directly to a production database and try and take the current state of the world, which is what the production database needs to represent, and use that to make predictions. It can be dangerous because you have users at all different points in their life cycle. So if we take a simple example of trying to take the person's first day behavior and use that to predict whether or not they'll convert or whether or not they'll do more later. Unless you keep a copy of what happened just in their first day, you may not be able to build the features that you need to feed the model. So this is a great use for a data warehouse because it doesn't make sense in a production database to store all of everything that people do in your app. You really need to store the current state of the world to make the app function. It's a much more of an analytics problem of what series of events are related to some other outcome that you care about. Make sure I get on my notes here. Great, yeah, so I think a good data warehouse can be a great thing for feeding your data scientist.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you have all of the different data sources in the same place. That's the sort of like precursor to all of this. We have a few customers who are doing data science work, and like the fact that they actually are able to put them all in the same place is just like the most important, crucial first step. Transformations as well, but just having them all in the same place is like just, I can't understate the importance of that here.
Yeah, much of the work that's done both creating a model and using it for inference requires you to have your data in one place, either in some online system where you do the training and evaluation and prediction, or sometimes it's better to have it where you can kind of build your features without having to go and fetch data from lots of different places.
Great. All right, I think this might be the engagement question that Ryan had hinted about earlier. We just launched a new feature and we want to automatically email users who haven't interacted with it yet. How would you go about doing this?
Yeah, so this is actually one of the most common questions that we get asked, and certainly a good use of a data warehouse. So the two sort of prerequisites that you need for this are you need usage logging for your features, so event data, product data, whatever it is. And then you also need a marketing tool that has automation capacity. That's pretty much all of them these days. But yeah, so what you do here is you have your data, you have the product information data in your warehouse. You want to send it to your marketing tool. Some databases and marketing tools have direct integrations. But the most common way to do this these days is through something called reverse ETL. Reverse ETL basically just takes data from a data warehouse and puts it into a number of different SaaS tools, including marketing specific ones. So two common ones there are like High Touch and Census. So yeah, so in this specific case, they launched a new feature and we want to automatically email users who haven't interacted with it yet. So a good way to do this would be first go to your event data, make a transformation around users who haven't interacted with that feature. That would be looking at certain events associated with the feature, whatever you have set up for that. And then now you have a list of those users. And then basically you can set that to run however frequently you want based on how often you want the emails to be sent. You could batch hourly, daily, that sort of thing. Run that transformation at that rate. Use the reverse ETL tool to dump all that data into your marketing tool. And now you have a list of the users that you actually want to send the campaign to. So then the campaign would be, in this case, hey, we launched this new product. Here's some education about it. Here's some documentation about it. This is how you would get good use out of it. And so then the marketing tool sort of handles that part of it, sends to all the users. And then, this process just sort of continuously works in the back end. So however often you're running your transform to send the data to the marketing tool, however often you have that set up, it'll send those emails out. We actually just implemented this ourselves a couple of weeks ago, using a mixture of Snowflake, Mozart for the transform stuff, High Touch for the reverse ETL, and then we use HubSpot for the marketing sending. So definitely a very, very common thing to be doing with your product data.
Yeah, and haven't used a feature may sound like a toy problem, but there may be cases where you want to segment your users based on their behavior and send them different marketing campaigns. And here you may not want to email everyone who's ever created an account. You might want to just email people who've logged in the last 30, 60, 90 days. And you may not want to spam the people who've already discovered the feature. So this gives you a way to say, take everyone who's used it recently, exclude the ones who've already interacted with the feature, and then now send specific messaging to just them. So it's a very neat use case for tying data that you collect in the warehouse, understanding your customers, and then using it to take automated actions with them.
All right, our next question is, our sales team closes deals in Salesforce and we need to make sure the payment actually comes through in Stripe. How do we do this?
So this is another real example case where we've helped a customer. In their case, they had salespeople who recorded that they made the deal in Salesforce, and then they had the finance team saying, where is it? And so this process that we helped them build was to bring their Salesforce and Stripe data together in a way that could help them do the reconciliation process. Now, again, back to the spreadsheets, you could do this for a while in spreadsheets without too much trouble. It is a bunch of copying and pasting, and it is a bunch of work kind of every time you want to do it, but it's possible. But once you reach a certain scale, your spreadsheets start to crumble. And you may really want to take actions on the ones that don't match. So you may not need to inspect every single one that does. Salesperson says they were going to invoice for this much, invoice came through. You don't really need to take an action on that. The place where you need to say take action is when the salesperson says they closed the deal and the payment doesn't come in. So those are the ones that you may need to investigate further. So I think this is a good example of a kind of operations reconciliation process that we've helped a customer with to really help them tighten up the two different parts of the business. I guess before working on the internet, I was surprised to learn that the switch for paid customer and the money going into the bank account aren't always directly connected. You kind of hope that the two of them go in tandem, but that doesn't always happen, especially when you don't want to cut your customer off if there's some confusion. But you really want to keep track of this because this is very important for ensuring your revenue is coming through.
Cool. Adam, do you have anything to add to this?
I think Ryan got it all there.
All right. So actually, our next question touches on something that Ryan kind of briefly talked about, which is at what point should you move from a spreadsheet to a BI or a visualization tool?
Yeah, so when starting out, a spreadsheet is a really good thing to use for doing reporting. If you have just a handful of people that need access to it, and maybe not quite as much time to go deep on your data, spreadsheets are super useful. You can get some basic reporting and charting going, actually do executive KPIs, that sort of thing. When the point at which it makes sense, I think, to move from a spreadsheet to a BI tool is when you start growing more and you need to start democratizing the data across your organization more. So for instance, say you've started adding product event logging, and you need to do analyses on that. Well, it's not really going to work in a spreadsheet. It's probably going to break. It's unwieldy. It's not really a good environment for it. It just doesn't make quite as much sense. So once you start getting larger and larger databases, information in your database, that's when you really need to start moving to a BI tool. Not only that, like if you want to take those basic reports you made in spreadsheets and actually make them better, the real way to do that is to actually explore your data and discover some new insights. And that's just not a great process to be done within a spreadsheet. They aren't really meant for that. They're meant more for just the core reporting type things. So BI tools help you do the sort of ad hoc analysis and actual discovery to sort of up your game on all of your reporting, make them more sophisticated, make them better, make them more specific. You want to go beyond doing just the sort of core dashboarding, executive style stuff. You want to start getting into each department, each new feature you release, each different product that you have as part of your platform. That's the point at which you really need to get a BI tool over a spreadsheet. Ryan, did you have anything there?
Yeah, so I could talk for hours about this one, so I'll try and keep it short. But just a reminder, BI is business intelligence, right? So this is a suite of tools that people sell to help you understand your business better. So if you think about, as a company progresses, when you start out, all your customers fit on one page, right? So you don't even need a spreadsheet if you can write them down on one page and kind of know and understand all of them. Now, as you start to get many pages of customers, you may want to sort them, you may want to add information about them, you may want to kind of evolve your understanding. As you start to get like tens or hundreds or thousands of customers, now you've got maybe more than will fit in a spreadsheet. I love the joke that big data is the first time you interact with big data is when you can't fit it in a spreadsheet. Because I think that's kind of a good experience for people when they go, man, this was working fine for a long time, and then I did this one more time, and then it stopped. I know Excel now has millions of rows, but back in my day, it didn't. And like another key point for a lot of these BI tools is the kind of automation that they can enable. So certainly there's the discovery and exploration part that Adam mentioned, but also they give you a way to build your transformations and build your visualizations and have the data flow into them automatically. So most spreadsheets are static. I know that there is a way to hack them to read from a database. It's kind of janky in my opinion, and can be error prone given that it's hard to inspect when things break. But a real solid BI tool can help give you the ability to pipe your data into your data warehouse, build your transformations there, and then view and export it in a nice consumable tool, right? So you can meet people where they are, and you can give, not teach everyone in your company SQL. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't want to do that, but some people may not think it's the most fun thing to do. But yeah, so I think there's kind of a good part of the evolution. And I think part of our message is not you have to use a BI tool or you need a data warehouse, but it's thinking about where you are in the life cycle and when's the right time for you to make that leap. One of the things that's amazing about a bunch of the tools today is that they can handle kind of the full life cycle of a company. So 100 years ago when I started, you had to transition different databases as your company grew. So I have been through, I can't tell you how many database migrations when one would run out of space and you have to move to a bigger one or try something new. And then changing technologies also gets very confusing. I think the world that we're in now, your SaaS tools can scale a ton. You can send data to a data warehouse that can grow with you until you're as big as they get. And then you really don't have the kind of complexity and switching costs from moving between a bunch of things. So life in a spreadsheet, you manually copy stuff all over, you do a lot of manual work. If you have an error, it can be hard to diagnose. To life in a BI tool where you have an automated platform of data flowing in and observations and dashboards and reports coming out can be kind of a major step forward for a business.
Yeah, and just what Ryan was saying about meeting people where they are, like it could be that you started a spreadsheet, you moved to a BI tool, and then you actually move to some mixture of these things. BI tools can, depending on what they are, they can be meant for more technical folks or less technical folks. So say you had a more technical version of a BI tool and you had a handful of people working in those. You could also possibly use something like Google Sheets as well, and do some sort of exporting from a warehouse to be able to use both at the same time. That can help enable people do their work better and also help with the exploration side too.
Yeah, I think I would argue that spreadsheets are the database that's most used in the world, right? Yeah. These are things that are used in basically every company, and they're pretty easy to get into because you can kind of inspect what's happening. So I think it's a great place to meet people where they are.
All right, before we move on to the next question, just want to give a quick reminder that we are taking live questions. We have about 10 minutes left. So again, if you have any questions related to product data, if there's any challenges that you're facing with your product data that we can help you with, we might not have the full answer for you during this session, but we're happy to kind of help at least start kind of like the troubleshooting or figuring out process. So yeah, if you do have any questions, put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will work them in just as we go. Okay, another question that we got was, how can we anonymize customer information in specifically Mozart Data?
All right, so this is a great broad topic. We'll try and take a couple of specific examples. Inside of Snowflake, one thing that you could do, Snowflake is a data warehouse underlying Mozart Data, is you can have an email address in there. You can set permissions so that only people who need to see it or robots that need to see it will have access to it. But you may want to reveal that it exists to someone else. So there's a number of different techniques that you can do. One of the simplest is hashing. So hash is a one-way function that produces what looks like garbage, but it produces the same garbage every time, which means that you can tell if that particular email showed up many times without knowing what the email address is and without a way to go backwards. And so one nice thing about this is that you can compare between multiple tools as long as you use the same hashing process, which is just the number of built-in functions in Snowflake for doing this. This can be a nice way to say, did the email address show up in a variety of different sources from different platforms where you may not be able to bring them together. One thing that I've seen in the past is that the name that an email goes to, the first part may be sensitive, but the domain may have a bunch of information. So you may know that people from Gmail, that's probably a personal email from people. In my previous job, we had a domain called Shark Lasers that was a short-lived email domain that was basically used by fraudsters. So you knew that if somebody used a Shark Lasers email, they were probably trying to scam. And so there's a bunch of information just in the domain of an email address. And the domains are shared with lots of people. And so there's kind of a lot that you can learn from it. But in order to get them, you have to break apart the email address at the @ sign. So one way to anonymize information is to take off the first part of the email, take out the domain, and hash the whole thing to see if that individual one shows up in many places. Certainly we think PII is very important. We use Snowflake, which has really amazing access controls and a lot of ways that you can limit access to data. There's definitely roles and groups and permissions that allow you to have data that some people can see and that others can't. And we have a experience in doing this and helping. So kind of based on your need, we can do quite a lot to help you protect your data. And then the anonymization, I think hashing is a standard. Now there are some more sophisticated techniques that probably take too long for this discussion, but there are other things that you can do outside of hashing to help anonymize and split apart information such that it's hard to get it back together, but that it is still consistent. Because if you just scramble everything, then you're looking at noise, and it's hard to understand kind of behaviors and activities there.
Okay. I also got a question asking, how do you get into this industry? What preparation is required?
Yeah, so this one's a little less product specific, I guess, but did receive this question, so wanted to talk about it. I'll talk about the second question first, what preparation is required. I think Ryan mentioned this a couple slides before, but spreadsheets are they're available to everyone. Everyone has used them before in school, in their career, in their personal life. It's sort of the first intro to databases. It's like, if you can get to know how spreadsheets work really well, then you're going to understand how a lot of data analysis works. So you can learn to manipulate the data in a spreadsheet. That's a great start. In general, I think there's some transferable skills that are required for data analysts. The first one being problem solving. This one is pretty generalized, is going to be required for almost any job you have, especially in tech, but certainly applicable here. Second one is basically be able to learn how to take a question that someone is asking and actually create the data and the reporting required to answer that question. So in a lot of cases, if another department is asking a question of you, they're not going to give you a very specific one. They're going to say something more general, like, how are users using our product? So you got to learn how to sort of take that question and ask them the questions back to them in terms of like get exactly what they want, but also just to think about it yourself. So in the case of how are users using the product, look at features, look at different usage for different features within your product. How can one of those lead to another? How are users getting to conversion? How does your funnel look? All of these sort of smaller questions try to answer that larger question of how are users using the product. So being able to like break down questions into smaller ones and actually make reports for those, I think that's a super important skill. And then sort of similarly, the ability to communicate to internal teams, as well as to communicate, empathy for internal teams and customers. So sort of like I was saying before, knowing what the different departments probably want, knowing that marketing wants, the marketing qualified leads, sales wants the sales qualified leads, finance wants to know the different conversions that are happening, product wants to know how users are using the product. Like actually like thinking about how those different departments what the questions that they would actually want answered. So like being able to empathize with like what they want. So that's really important. Also, like I was saying before, being able to communicate with them, asking them the right questions. And a lot of the case, you aren't going to have that much time to spend with them. So to me, being able to like actually do it on your own is really important. But then additionally, the empathy for the customers. So really understanding how your product works, using your product yourself, and like going through the different flows and trying to find the different pain points, thinking about ways in which people would like uniquely use the product. That's like a really important skill to have in terms of like actually making reporting. So how do you back into things? In terms of the first question, it's just a perennial sort of chicken and egg problem, right? How do you have experience without having experience? I guess a few things. Definitely learn about the tools and the different roles, what a data engineer does, what a data analyst does, what are BI tools, which databases exist, the different querying languages, like all that stuff. Just doing research there, I think, is really important. Very recent phenomena are these boot camps. So boot camps basically will give you like a class where you go through and you learn all about data analysis. In some cases, they're actually trying to find you a job. It's like, they'll be like, you don't have to pay. And then like they take part of your salary on if you get a job. So they're like sort of bought in on finding a job for you. In some cases, they just have like extra like job fairs and that sort of thing. You can find an internship around using data in SQL. I believe Ryan did this.
Yeah, I got my first data analyst job was in grad school, and I got a analyst job. I had never interacted with a database, but I told them I could probably learn. Learned SQL on the job from a database person, and was able to get the data out that I needed to help understand what was happening with the customers. So yeah, I think there's a ton of value in getting experience and trying to find someone that you can use the skills you have to build the skills that you need to get the job that you want.
Yeah, and another way is just doing like a lateral transfer within a company. This is actually what I did. Find a company that you're super interested in or you truly believe in, and try and get like an internship there or a full-time role. And then, show interest in the actual analytics, show interest in learning whatever database, whatever sets of data that they have. So when I joined my first job, I was primarily doing content operations and curation. I showed interest in actually learning a lot about content metrics, became the sort of go-to person for the entire content team, and then eventually started doing reporting for basically half of the org that a lot of the engineering side wasn't supporting. So that's another great way to sort of to get the experience, is to like join a company in a separate role and then just be sure that you're showing interest in actually learning the stuff and doing it for the company. Showing value is especially important.
All right, so with that, that's going to be our last question, unfortunately. We are going to wrap up here. But before we do, I want to share just an additional resource for everyone. So Tempo is, you may or may not have heard of him. They are one of those AI-powered fitness companies. And so they're one of our customers. They faced a lot of kind of similar challenges, or they had a lot of similar questions to some of the things that we talked about today. They had lots of data on their customers and their product, but they weren't really using it because their data was scattered across many systems, and they didn't have the data infrastructure that would really help them organize and analyze their data. So we have a case study that covers basically how they solved that, and some of the cool things that they've been able to do with their data since then. This includes building a lookup tool for their support agents, which actually allows them to really quickly and easily look up customers' information, and also like customers' product information as well. And then they've also been able to proactively monitor customer and product trends through automated dashboards. And so they really kind of changed their kind of like company culture from being reactive and fighting fires as they came up to being really proactive. Which is fantastic to see. And I think a lot of companies, like that's their goal. So if you're interested in reading the case study, you can find that at mozartdata.com/resources. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope today's event was helpful. If you're interested in learning more about Mozart Data, or if you want to share any feedback with us on this event, feel free to reach out to us at amadeus@mozartdata.com. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll send out a recording to everyone tomorrow, so look out for that. But that's all for today. Thanks again, and have a great day.